Catholic Confederation in the summer of 1642. The Confederation became a de facto government of most of Ireland, free from the control of the English administration and loosely aligned with the royalist side of the wars of the three kingdoms. The subsequent Irish Confederate Wars continued in Ireland until the 1650s, when Oliver Cromwell's new model army decisively defeated the Irish Catholics and Royalists and reconquered the country. The 1641 Irish Rebellion is seen as a key event in the mid-17th century collapse of the Stuart monarchy. The roots of the 1641 rebellion lay in the failure of the English state in Ireland to assimilate the native Irish elite in the wake of the Elizabethan conquest and the plantation of the country. The pre-Elizabethan Irish population is usually divided into the Old or the Gaelic Irish and the Old English or descendants of medieval Norman settlers. This group were historically antagonistic with the English settled areas such as the Pale around Dublin, South Wexford and other walled towns being fortified against the rural Gaelic clans. And one of them, of course, in the north, as we all know, is Derry, which is known as a walled city. So the rebellion brought about the need for emergency money in Ireland to pay for an army and resources. This was issued by the Lord Justices of Dublin. Now I'm going to skip forward a little bit with the Irish Rebellion to come back to the English. Please, Stephen. Alright, so here we have the emergency money of 1642 and 43. It's called Inchiquin money, issued by Lord Justice Inchiquin in Dublin. These pieces were cut from flattened out silver plate issued in 1642. So here we can see an example of one of the pieces and some of the other different denominations that were used at the time. There was another issue, the annual issue of 1642, and some of the denominations. And 1643 Dublin money, as it was called, and a couple of the denominations that are known. Right, next one please, Stephen. Then we've got the emergency money of 1643 to 44 and 49, which I've got down the bottom here, but I don't have a photo of it, unfortunately. I don't have any of that money. So issue of 1643, we can see that it has the Roman numerals for the value. So you've got your shilling, V1 sixpence and your threepence, and there's many die varieties exist of these. I do have several examples of these in the cabinet down the end, as well as for the Inchiquin money. And here are some of the other denominations that exist. 1649, only the crown and the half crown exist that we know of. Next one please, Stephen. Local issues of southern towns of refuge. Now this is still within Ireland. So we've got Bandon Bridge farthing, we've got the Kinsale farthing. Both of these are down in the cabinet. One that I am missing is the Youghal farthing. I've never actually seen one for sale. And I imagine if I did see it, it's probably going to be in the high thousands of dollars. Next please, Stephen. Right, now the most interesting of all of the cities of refuge are the Cork City of Refuge. Now they only made a shilling and a sixpence, and they were cut on an 8-sided octagonal piece with Cork 1647 and the Roman numerals XII for the shilling. The sixpence generally was exactly the same but smaller than the shilling. However, this particular sixpence, I maybe have mentioned to someone before, we can see the VI for our sixpence. We can see a cork stamp, no date visible, and that cork stamp is somewhat different from this cork here. And we also see, just coming through here, a rosette. This is proven to be an English the first sixpence clipped down because, of course, sixpences in Ireland were smaller, had less silver in them than the sixpence in England. So this is clipped down, ever so slightly smaller. Both of these coins are in the cabinet if you wish to see them. And there is no other known example of this particular piece. So obviously at the time, needs must. Now whether this was produced in 1647 or produced slightly before, slightly after, we do not know. Cork was not liberated as a city until 1649. So we don't know exactly. Well, 1647 we can imagine this one was produced in 1647, but the second one, no idea. Next one please, Stephen, thank you. Right, the English Civil War. The English Civil War, 42 to 51, was a series of armed conflicts and political manoeuvring between parliamentarians, the Roundheads, and the Royalists, the Cavaliers, over principally the manner of England's government. The first, 1642 to 46, and the second, 48 to 49 wars pitted the supporters of King Charles I against the supporters of the Long Parliament, while the third, 49 to 51, saw fighting between supporters of King Charles II and supporters of the Rump Parliament. The war ended with a parliamentarian victory at the Battle of Worcester on the 3rd of September 51. The overall outcome of the war was threefold: the trial and execution of Charles in 49, the exile of his son Charles II in 51, and the replacement of the English monarchy with at first the Commonwealth of England and then the Protectorate under the personal rule of Oliver Cromwell, 53 to 58, and subsequently his son, 58 to 59. The monopoly of the Church of England on Christian worship in England ended with the victors consolidating the established Protestant ascendancy in Ireland. Constitutionally, the wars established the precedent that an English monarchy cannot govern without Parliament's consent, although the idea of Parliament as the ruling power of England was only legally established as part of the Glorious Revolution of 1688. It is widely believed that Oliver Cromwell, when he first took control of the army back in 1646, I believe, he had the control of the army. His whole design was on taking power and being a dictator. So he was intending to be a Donald Trump. Next please, Stephen. Right. So here we show some coins minted, not necessarily during the Civil War, but this one is a Charles I Tower mint minted under Charles. Our mint mark is a triangle here. And now we have pretty much the same coin minted under Parliament in 1645 to 1646. Do make amendments in your pieces of paper. They're both Nicholas Brio's bust, but our mint mark is now a sun. Next one please, Stephen. Right, some provincial mints operated during the Civil War. So we've got York, and here is an example of a threepence. And Worcester, 2.5 shilling. Exeter, 6pence. Bridge North on 7. Very, very interesting. Bridge North on 7. Bristol. Now both of these two, as you can see, have a proclamation on the back. And we have Aberystwyth. Aberystwyth was minting right up until the beginning of the Civil War. But it's yet again, it is a provincial mint. And it has the little plume in front of Charles. Next please, Stephen. Thank you. Okay, now we get to the interesting items. If you can start, have a look at that. Please keep it in its plastic cover. I will get to that one as it goes around. But cities under siege, we have 4 of. Carlisle. And what do we have here? We have a shilling of Carlisle. Then we have Newark of 1646. I believe this one is dated. Charles Royal. OBS is, or OB, Latin for obsidian or siege, as is on all of the siege coins. And Pontefract, here we have a 2 shilling of Pontefract. These two are in the cabinet down the end. Next, please, Stephen. And the best known siege is Scarborough, the siege of Scarborough Town and Scarborough Castle. Now, the Scarborough siege pieces come in 3 types. First one, there was only a 5 shilling piece, and it had written on the back of it, Scarborough 1645, I believe. And it looks like it's just hand engraved on it, but that was actually put on the piece at the time. It is still a bracket, and that is the type of castle. Very, very good quality piece indeed. Now, type 2, there are quite a few denominations, and some of them are listed down here, and they're odd sizes, because they just cut the pieces of silver out, weighed it, and said, okay, well, that's the equivalent of a shilling and 7 pence or something. So here we go, 5 shilling and 8 pence, 2 shilling and 10 pence, 2 shilling and 7 pence, a shilling and 4 pence, a shilling and a penny, 11 pence, 10 pence, 9 pence, 8 pence, 7 pence, 6 pence, so on and so forth.
That's the one being passed around, is it?
This fellow here is the crown. It has a V, S, so we've got S for shilling, 5 of. It has a non-turret castle. And this one is also a type 2. This is a 4 pence with the same, it's actually used the same die strike on there as it is on here. The only difference, of course, down the bottom is we've got DIV for 4 pence, and it's a lot smaller. So this fella's in the cabinet, this boy's been passed around. This one was found metal detecting. I won't go into too much detail of it because it's not totally iffy. Metal detecting on the grounds of the remains of Scarborough Castle. It actually shows the burn marks of where the castle was raised by a sapper's fire. And on the back of it in particular, you can see the burn quite heavily on the coin. So it obviously didn't get enough heat that it caused it an issue, but it got enough, thank you, it got enough heat that it burnt the silver, and it's actually tarnished it quite badly, and it's very evident in the coin. And then we go to type 3. Now the 2 examples that I'm showing down there is a 2 shilling and a shilling. The 2 shilling is rather thick. It's quite a big coin, but it's obviously weight-wise it would be 2 shilling compared to the 5. But it appears as though it's been cut from the base of the plate because it's a thick part of the plate. But this one is rather interesting. This shilling is cut from the rim of the plate. Now we think that the 2 shilling is from a serving plate because of its thickness, but this is definitely from an eating plate. But this plate was probably gilded because part of the gilding still remains in the cracks and in the edges. And when you take a look at the piece down there, you can see the gilding still starting to shine through. And on the castle here, bits of gilding just in the cracks, which is what makes that piece extremely interesting. Yes, sir.
It was wonderful to handle that 5 shilling piece that you passed round, but that was a high denomination. That would have bought a lot, wouldn't it, in the castle?
Oh yeah, yeah. That was no shortage of coin, that thing, which is why there's only 5 of them in existence. And the other 4 are in British museums. So, ladies and gentlemen, you that have handled one, they're probably one of very few that are ever going to handle that coin, because none of them exist outside of a museum except for the one that's in my pocket. So, a very, very interesting little piece indeed. Yes, you're right. It would have bought a lot, but so would 2 shillings. And a shilling would have bought a fair amount back in those days as well.
Where do you think the 5 shilling would have been taken from? What bit of...
Right. You see the rim up the top? This
Yeah.
was taken from the top edge of a serving plate. And
Right.
going by the curvature of the coin that we've got, we tried to draw out an imaginary serving plate. Now, we are fairly certain that the plate wasn't round, because if the plate was round, it would have been about that size. What we think is the plate was an oval plate,
Mhm.
and it's a piece from somewhere
Cut from the
around
top.
the top middle of the plate.
What was the authority in the besieged castle, Kevin? Was it, there was a monitor in the castle, or was the castle was independent, I suppose?
There was no money at Scarborough. It was just a blacksmith who would have made up a die and said, right, let's resist this and let's have some sort of, or someone would have said to him, we need you to make up a die that is specific for here, but we know is money, that we can put a particular weight on it to say that this is worth 2 shilling and threepence, so that we can now circulate some sort of currency while we're under siege, hoping that this will only happen for a month or two, and the troops will come in and they'll save our ass and off we go. And
Then you'd be able to swap it for real money.
then we'll be able to get rid of the damn thing, and yeah, but it is worth its weight in silver,
Yeah.
so you're not losing anything, so everything's grand. I don't think they really thought about what the end game was going to be. They were assuming that they were going to get relieved, and a relief column did come, but it didn't manage to relieve them. They just couldn't get through, so they gave up. So they left the castle to its own defences. Now the castle fell.
Who was in the castle? Were they royalists?
They were royalists.
They
Yes.
were royalists
Yes.
entrapped in the besieged castle.
Trapped in the siege. They surrendered when there was just no hope left. So then the parliamentarians left a very small contingent to look after the castle and took off. So they took the castle back again. The royalists took it back again. But because it was a very important, it was a strategic point. I mean, it was on a river. Jesus, they needed it. So it didn't take long for the parliamentarians to send a team back and take the thing back again. So that's part of the history of Scarborough Castle. I can't go into it in too much detail because I don't know enough about it. I haven't researched enough about Scarborough Castle to know exactly every day-to-day event that happened in there. But that's a bit of an outline of how some of these pieces were conceived and the fact that there was 3 types. So we are assuming that they were made in different periods. And we are also assuming that the type 3 is the second siege of the castle. But it's an assumption. We don't know for sure. Next please, Stephen. Right, under new coinage, or the new coinage under the Commonwealth, the coins that were struck between 49 and 59 during the term of the Commonwealth have inscriptions in English instead of Latin. They refused to have Latin spoken in England at the time. All knowledge of Latin was removed. Everything was in English, or Old English as we would know it, as a truer expression of Protestantism. St George's Cross and the Irish harp take the place of the royal arms. The silver halfpenny was issued for the last time. Coins with a mid-marked sun were struck under the protectorship of Cromwell. Those with the anchor were struck under the protectorship of Richard, who was Oliver Cromwell's son. Richard was a particularly stupid individual, so he didn't last very long. They soon kicked him out. And at that stage, Parliament thought, well...
I mean, the king is better than that guy.
Yeah, the royalists weren't that bad, were they? Oh, we'll invite young Charles back and see how we go. And as we know, the line continued, well, it continued for another 2 anyway. So here we have a 2 shilling and 6pence, a shilling, a tuppence. And I'll put a couple of other examples down here of another tuppence. This is a sixpence, penny, and the halfpenny. It's worth having a look at these in the cabinet because that halfpenny is tiny and there's very, very few of them around. Probably not because they didn't make many, but because they're so damn small, they just disappeared. Or they maybe got melted down because they were worthless. So that's
I've
our...
heard just literally falling through the cracks.
Literally. I'd say that's right. I mean, a good metal detector will find the flaming things, but it takes a good one because they are damn small. Right, next please. Okay, so Cromwell. Now, these were patterns, the shilling and the crown. He made a few more than these two, but these are the two that I have. And in particular, I've got a tanner's copy, which I'll explain down the bottom what a tanner's copy is. They are called pattern coins, but it is well believed within numismatic circles that Cromwell intended these to go into circulation. He was starting to get control of the country. In fact, he had good control of the country, and he was becoming a dictator. So he would have had a whole series of coinage from here on in made with his likeness for the rest of his days. Fortunately, the SOB died nice and early, so they didn't get a chance to get them out there. But a few of them did survive. So here we go. Oliver Cromwell, September 58, he died, was an English military political leader. He served as Lord Protector of the Commonwealth of England, Scotland and Ireland from 1653 until his death, acting simultaneously as head of state and head of government of the new republic. So he wasn't only head of state, he was head of the government as well. Cromwell had no formal training in military tactics and followed the common practice of arranging his cavalry in three ranks and pressing forward, relying on impact rather than firepower. His strengths were an instinctive ability to read and train his men and his moral authority. In a war fought mostly by amateurs, these strengths were significant and are likely to have contributed to the discipline of his cavalry. So, even though we know he was an SOB as a leader of a country, as a military man, even with no formal training, he had instinct. And instinct is all you need to survive. If you have instinct, you will get your people through. And he showed that he had that. And for those who have read on, it talks about how he organised his cavalry in a nice tight formation so that they couldn't run wide with troops, the troops that they're charging, ending up between them and being able to take them down. They closed ranks, so they were knee to knee as they rode or charged into battle. So even anyone coming down the side got a wallop from a knee, so they went down. So they took out everything in the row, didn't give anyone the opportunity to flank them. Good thinking. Now, I did talk about a tanner's copy down the bottom here. A tanner's copy. This coin is the work of John Sigismund Tanner, who was one of the engravers at the Royal Mint from 1727 to 1758. The crown was produced using Thomas Simon's punches that were used to strike Cromwell's original coins. The punches were repaired and new die legends were cut to produce this coin that was struck to be sold to a small number of collectors. The tanner's copy is actually rarer than the original Cromwell coin and worth somewhat more. I thought I was actually buying a Cromwell coin. I didn't realise I was getting a tanner's copy. When I found out it was a tanner's copy, I was more than happy. I just kept my mouth shut. I said, that'll do nicely. Eventually I'll get a Cromwell one, but I'm quite happy to have a tanner's because you never see them for sale. Next please, Stephen. Right. To keep it short, this page here is on the back page of your literature, so I'm not going to talk about it. I don't think it's the last one, is it, Stephen?
Last time.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk about it for...
We have time, really, because
Well, we're better off to go back over the coins rather than
this,
crapping on about the history that no one's probably interested in, but they are interested
because
in.
there's only one talk after you, and then it's lunch and we're 10 minutes late for lunch, so what?
Gotcha. Could you go back to, does anyone in particular want to see anything? We'll go back to this one. Can you zoom in on our 5 shilling? Again.
No problem. That one?
Yes. See if you can get a bit closer on the back of it.
It's only one zoom level. Sorry, that's as close as we get.
Well, we'll be happy with that. Okay, well, from my angle it looks pretty good. Hopefully it does from yours. But you should be able to see the burn marks on the back of it. Now that I've mentioned it, how about I send this thing around again and pay particular attention to the back. I mean, the front obviously is singed as well, but the back shows right through here and here where it's been in a fairly serious amount of heat.
Can't see much at all.
No, you need it out of plastic, but I don't want to take it out.
Just better light.
Kevin, these siege pieces seem to be very heavily dominated by high denomination coins. And yet you think that within for the normal commerce within a castle, it'd be small
It'd be
things
smaller.
that people are buying. I know that they've got the basis of their silver, so silver's got to be worth more than copper tokens or something. So was there a supply of copper coins to supplement this?
Well, this was silver. No, there was no copper.
No, but was there an existing good supply of coppers within these castles, do you think?
I would say not, because if there was, they would have made the coinage in them. But if most of these denominations are quite high denominations, what does that tell you, Benny?
Well, there's obviously money around and there's big transactions going on.
It also tells you that the peasants who would have been buying food and essentials for day-to-day living wouldn't have been using coinage. They were probably using a barter system. I would think so. Because
Maybe
if you
they had
zoom
soup
back out,
kitchens and things.
Sorry?
Maybe they had soup kitchens because they'd had to do something to provide food.
You're right.
They weren't growing things.
highly likely, because some families would have had maybe a plentiful supply of something, and other families might have been lacking, and another family might have had a couple of cows or something so they could produce milk. I would say barter would have been extremely rife during the sieges. Extremely.
And these things, the high denominations, I would assume, were basically used to, oh, this soldier hasn't been paid for 2 months, here you go.
Yeah, because most of it was used to pay the soldiers. That tended to be a lot, not the big ones, but...
And it's not up to the soldier what the heck he does with a crown.
Oh, he would never have got a crown. But your 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, I think there's a
This is the
4,
same coin that was
there's
around
an
last
11,
time.
10, 9, 8, 7. I think there's a 4, a groat, and a 2. I don't think there's any 1s. I've never seen a 1. I'd have to look in the book, but I can't remember seeing any 1s. I know that some of these odd sizes are fairly scarce, but they are about. You do come across them. Now, the shilling, a type 2 is probably the most common. But even type 2, they tend to rock in at about £3,000 or £4,000 and up in any sort of decent condition. Once you get up to the shillings and the sixpence, like that shilling and that sixpence down there, you're up around £50,000, £60,000 for those, so there's not too many of them floating about. I've seen some where they've been either poorly struck or they've just been worn fairly well used, and a lot of them have holes drilled in them and used as pendants. Very, very common to use the siege pieces after the siege as pendants.
You see that particularly with the Newark ones with the lozenge shape and the attachment at the top.
Please go, yeah, there you go. I mean, these ones haven't been drilled, but they very well could be, because you are right, they tend to lend themselves to being a pendant, and a lot of them are pendants. Carlisle, I believe that the value placed on Carlisle siege coins is somewhat below where it should be, because they are hard to find. Newark, plenty. Pontefract, if you're looking for a siege coin, you will always find a Newark and a Pontefract somewhere around the world for sale. Probably more than one. You'll find a few of them for sale. You're going to need a couple of £1,000 for them, but you'll get them. So,
Kevin, in some of the siege coinage is made of leather. When plate ran out in some of the prolonged sieges.
yeah.
But of course that doesn't survive except in very rare cases.
Very
But I
few
know there are
exist.
some examples of obsidional coins made of leather.
Sorry, what was that? A question?
Made of leather.
Yeah. I don't have any leather ones, and I've not physically seen any, but I think you're right, they did deteriorate.
But, you know, people under siege, they use what they had. And
Yeah.
as I said, if they didn't have any silver,
Yeah.
you know, they used whatever they had. You had the siege of Leiden, where they got some prayer books, paper mache'd them, punched out holes in them, and used those as blanks for coins.
Now, admittedly, I've never seen any gold siege pieces. I believe that there is not any. I think they're only in silver. Can we go back to
Isn't there one
the,
in Inchiquin money?
sorry,
Isn't there one example in Inchiquin
that's not a
money?
siege coin. That's
Oh,
an
is it?
emergency.
Oh, okay.
So where are we going?
Uh, go up to the Irish. There we go. Go up another one. Up another one. And up another one. Okay. So there's your Inchiquin money, which came out in 3 different types. We'd have to look in the book to see if there's a gold, because I just have no interest in gold, so
Yeah.
I've not
I
looked
think
into
there's
it.
only one example.
It very well could be, and I'd imagine it would be quite an expensive example. These fellows here, well, Inchiquin are a bit more expensive than the Ormond, but they're still relatively well priced for someone wanting to get into something that is a city of refuge or emergency coinage of that period. You'll pick up tatty ones of these for around £200 to £300, and you'll pick up nice ones for around £1,000, so they're not over the top. And if we can pop down to the next one.
On that one on the left, they had the number 21, see on that,
3.21.
3 doctors, is it?
Yep. Free denarius weight.
Oh, I see, it's a weight thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Big
It's a
big
weight.
weights at 21 grams.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the next one. And when we go to Ormond, we can see that they're a little bit easy to understand with shillings, sixpence, threepence, and all the rest of them, of course, have a 2 or a 4. A VI we've got, and the half crown, which I don't have. But yet again, these are relatively easily obtainable with a small amount of money. So anyone with £400 or £500 will get a half decent one. So one that you wouldn't be upset about having in your cabinet. If you're prepared to pay £1,000, you'll get quite a nice one of those. Pop down to the next one. Right, these little farthings are absolute rat bags to find. The yawl especially is hard to find. I just haven't come across any. Kinsale is probably rarer than Bandon Bridge. The value put on them in the book is not even close to where they go at. What are they going at the moment, Jerry?
Oh, probably
A couple of thousand?
a couple of £1,000.
Yeah. And the book says £750.
And that's if you can read them.
Yeah, if you can read it, you're dead right. £750 if you can't read it.
Part of it.
But they're pretty little coins, and they're sitting in the cabinet for those that want to look. Pop to the next one, Stephen. But these two here, I consider to be the most interesting of all the Irish. They're probably the most basic, plain, nothing special about them. But Cork as a city of refuge. An interesting story about Cork City of Refuge. Well, not the story, but how it was liberated. Oliver Cromwell's army camped at the base of Blackwater Castle before they went to liberate Cork City. Now, Blackwater Castle is on the edge of the River Blackwater. It's currently 37 acres of land. And a good friend of mine owns the castle. He's owned the castle for about 40 years, 30 years or something. Well, his dad owned it before him, and when his dad died, it's a lovely restored castle. So if you ever get to Ireland, go to Blackwater Castle, say hello to Patrick and say hey from me. He's a lovely man. But Cromwell's army camped at the base of Blackwater Castle. It's up on the hill, and big steep drop off, huge big fields in front of the river. So here we have water. So we've got replenishment for the troops, we've got fantastic grazing land, so that the farmers would have had all sorts of stuff out. So there was plenty of food for them, there was water, it was just a nice area for them to recuperate or get together before the battle. And then after the battle, they came back to Blackwater Castle, where they sat for 2 or 3 days and played cards or whatever they did back in 1647, or 49 as it was, before moving up to Dublin and jumping on ships and going back to England, most of them. These two pieces were actually found, we found them metal detecting in the fields where Cromwell's armies were. Same with the 2 farthings. So that tells us that when they liberated the city, the town of refuge, any coins that were there, even if they were held by Parliament or people supporting the Parliament, these buggers obviously stole them, put them in their pockets, had a great time, had a bit of a jolly at Blackwater Castle, got absolutely annihilated on the local brew, because the monks were brewing some good stuff back then, and fell out of their pocket, and voila, into the ground. And it had never been metal detected until Patrick says to me, "You're forever going to the UK with your flaming detector. Why don't you go around the castle? Cromwell's army camped down here." I went, "What?" "Oh yeah." So we made a deal. Any coinage at all I kept, any musket balls and arrowheads and anything else he kept, which worked for me, but he ended up with a bucket full of musket balls and arrowheads and axe heads and all sorts of stuff. I ended up with about 30 or 40 coins, but we're quite happy. I'm happy with those anyway. But there was a plethora of things in the ground to be found from all eras. So not only did I find coins from Cork, but I also found much later Free State, 1928 shillings and sixpences and all sorts of stuff. So there was a real plethora of stuff to be found at Blackwater Castle. It had never been detected. And really, I only just touched on it. I did it for about 2 or 3 weeks. And I said to Patrick, I said, "I've got better things to be doing, but thank you very much." I said, "Here's a metal detector, you carry on." So, and no, Patrick, he was too lazy to go out there. Lord of the Manor, he wasn't going to pull out a metal detector. But that would have been an opportunity for a lot of stuff to be found around Blackwater Castle. I think we're well picked. Thank you, Tony.
Very interesting talk.
You were very lucky having your friend owning the castle.
You are so right.
Thank you very much, Kevin. And now we're on to our last talk, which was going to be Ross, but he swapped with Stephen. So, Stephen, your turn. You'll be able to do, someone can do that for you?
I'll try and steer it from there, but I might need someone to do some zooming or something.
If I have to, it is forwards and backwards.
Just the
arrows.
button there.
Do you need
So
one of those?
Stephen's title
Should be fine. I'll walk up to the screen, but
was called Inside an Ancient Roman Mint. That's still the title?
more or less, yes.
More or less, there we go. And then that'll bring us up to lunchtime and we can essentially have something to eat before we get on our merry ways.
Kevin, wonderful talk.
Okay.
I've passed them. Everybody's got one of the 2.
I think some of you might have heard me give my confession to Rod, because when he phoned me or emailed me and said, you know, can I have a couple of topics? I gave him a couple of topics, and then promptly forgotten that I'd given him 2 topics. So I worked on the first one that you all saw yesterday, and I had that with me. And then after a little dinner on the first night, I went back to my room and was just lazily reading through this, and I saw my name down on Sunday. I nearly went back to Rod and said, I don't know anything about ancient Roman mints. You must have someone else. You must have confused me with someone else. But then I remembered back in February when Rod asked me for the topic, I'd been in a deep and meaningful conversation on the internet, on some internet forums, about this topic. So that's where I got the idea from. That's why Rod had me down for doing this. So basically I've just sort of summarised some of that discussion that I was having, because it's all there on the internet.
Obviously now.
Okay, so it started off, this discussion, by somebody asking, why are so many ancient coins struck slightly off-centre? Here's a typical example. Now, it's not super far off-centre, you can still see Caesar's portrait there, but it's not well-centred. And he was saying, you know, why are they all, so many of them, like very many of them are just slightly off-centre, you know, they might be missing half the legend or something like that. Here's basically the answer that I gave, that these ancient coins, they're struck entirely by hand, as we all know. There's no sort of machine, because he thought there must have been some sort of machinery that sort of kept everything centred while this thing was coming. And no, it's all struck entirely by hand. The blank is placed down on top of the obverse die by hand. The reverse die is placed on top of the obverse die by hand. And the coin is then struck by a handheld hammer. And then the finished coin is inspected by hand. It's all completely manual. You know, we all know this. We all touched on some of this, particularly with some of the medieval talks we've had over the weekend. There's a rare example of a surviving ancient Roman die. This is an obverse die. So this is one of the anvil dies that would have been put down on a little cup inside the anvil, and then you'd place the coin down inside the little hollow where the design is, place the blank down there, and then die would go down and all get whacked with a hammer. But this then led to a fairly obvious point. That's a lot of hands. All these people, hands going everywhere. How many people were actually needed to strike an ancient Roman coin? Now, we've seen some, here's the exact answer that I initially gave. We don't have an awful lot of written documentation about the internal structure of a mint, exactly how coins are made. It was sort of like a trade guild, sort of a bit of a secret, so it wasn't something that was publicly known, because obviously if you're going to make it publicly known how to make coins, then criminals are going to read that and find it out, and they'll go and make their own coins. So they obviously tried to keep some sort of secrets, so it wasn't completely obvious, which obviously means a lot of, if they did write stuff down, it hasn't survived. Each mint city probably had their own secret techniques and trades, because didn't necessarily learn how to do it from somebody coming all the way from Rome to teach them how to do it. But we do have some very interesting pieces of archaeological evidence here and there popping up, and a lot of this come up in that discussion. Okay, this one, somebody had this picture pop up earlier. We've got the typical medieval scene over there. And you see, this is a one-man job. He's doing everything. He's got the reverse die in one hand, he's got the hammer in the other hand, and he's sitting there doing everything. This may have been true for medieval coins like these depictions, but in Roman times it wasn't a one-man job. Because, as I pointed out, you've run out of hands. Even this guy, and doesn't have a hand free to pick the coin up and put it aside and put the blank on. He's got to put his tools down to do that sort of thing. That'll take a lot of time. Obviously, okay, when you're making the beautiful gold coins, okay, you're going to have a craftsman and he's going to spend maybe several minutes on each coin. Go bang, bang, bang. Yeah, that looks good. Here, put that down, get the nice one. But that's not going to be good enough for high-speed production, which is what you're going to need to make enough coins to power an empire. So this was not the Roman way. Okay, so we do have some evidence from the coins themselves. This is a bronze tessera. What's a tessera? We don't know. It's not a coin. It's too big to be a coin, and it's obviously not circulated, so it didn't circulate as a coin. It's sort of a medal, obviously, some sort of medal sort of trinket. Was it used for a votive offering? We don't know. But this particular one survived, and this one obviously has something to do with the mint, because it's got Juno, Manita, the Temple of Manita on one side, and a minting scene on the other. And you can see there's more than one person in the frame there, a three-man team. So what are these people doing? Okay, we've got the big guy with the hammer, the Maliator, obviously standing there with the hammer, taking a big swing. We've got somebody lining up and holding the reverse die, a Signator. And we've got somebody pulling down the blanks and then taking the finished coin out once the bang has happened. That's Apostor. How do we know what these titles were? Is that just something that numismatists have made up, or is it something that actually has some sort of basis in the archaeological record? We will get to that. But first of all, this is a fresco that they found in Pompeii. Now obviously the little cupids are mythical, but they're reasonably convinced that all the tools that they're holding and all the jobs that they're doing are an actual depiction of what was going on in a Roman mint at the time of the fall of Pompeii, 79 AD, or sometime before that. So what's going on here? We've got some minting coins over there. That's just a two-person team. I think the third person might have been too confusing for this particular artist. So again, you've got the guy with the hammer and got somebody holding it all, the kit all down there. We've got the overseer, the exactor, and somebody obviously doing some quality control there, the officinator. You can tell he's the overseer because he's sitting in the curule chair, the boss chair. That guy over there, he's got a little tiny hammer. It's too small to be striking a coin with. So that guy's probably cutting a die. He's the sculptor. And obviously over there, we've got a guy way on the end, he's running a bellows, and you've got this guy here, he's got a little pair of tongs, and he's fishing something out of the forge. Those pair of tongs will come in, we'll be seeing those shortly. Okay, this came up in the discussion. Somebody posted a link to another forum discussion on the topic, and I had not heard of this. It's a very interesting, very fascinating artifact that's been discovered in the Roman Forum. It's the base, a plinth, the base of a statue. And it has named on it the people who were working in the mint and the jobs that they had. And it's very precise in terms of, right here, 6th of February, and then it gives the year. The year equates to AD 115. So we know on February 6, AD 115, the mint in Rome, which must have been somewhere near where this plinth was. We don't know exactly where the mint was. It used to be in the temple of Juno Manita. That's why we call it money, named after Manita. But it had moved out of the temple because it had gotten too big. So we don't know exactly where it was, but it must have been somewhere near this plinth for this plinth to have some relevance. So we know the mint employed 1 exactor and 1 assistant, 25 officinators, all of these guys are free people, 17 signatories, 5 of whom were slaves, because in the column here, each column, okay, there's the job that they had, signatores, supplistores, maliatores here, and here are all their names, and here's whether they were free, the lid, or slave, serf. So it lists the breakdown of all the jobs that they had and whether they were slaves or free. Because we sometimes have this idea of, oh, everybody must have been a slave doing all this hard work. Okay, not everybody. 11 supplistores, 4 of whom were slaves, and 39 maliators, 28 of whom were slaves. Obviously, you know, the maliators are the guys who are doing a lot of the heavy work, sort of thing, so that's where you'd expect most of the slaves to be. But even there, they're not all slaves. Sculptors aren't listed on this plinth. They might have had a second plinth, they might have had a second thing, we don't know. The people who actually cut the dies, it might have been in a separate facility and somebody walked the dies over to where they actually use them. We don't know why they're not mentioned on this thing. Yeah, so you know, 120 odd people working in the mint at the time. So you know, I mentioned that to make a Roman coin you need a three-man team. It's obviously a lot more three people. There's a lot of three-man teams here. And obviously, you know, you got a ratio of roughly 3 to 1 between the hammer guys and the other guys doing the rest of it. So obviously the hammer guy's got a bit of a rest. You know, make 100 coins or something like that, and you can sit down for 5 minutes, and the other guy comes on. A rest which the guy just holding the die or shuffling coins didn't need, unless he got the timing wrong and had his hand squished by a hammer. So I found that very interesting. I hadn't heard of the existence of this artifact before. Going out at hammer and tongs. So here are some ancient coins, actual coins, circulating coins, depicting tools that are used in the coin production. Okay, so we've got the little tongs. Got the hammer. This is a Kushan coin, and again he's got the tongs, tongs and hammer. Got tongs here, more tongs. This guy's got the hammer and the tongs. So, I mean, these things could be general blacksmith tools, but you know, also there are points to point out that why these could be specific tools for making coins. The tongs are small. They're too small to pick up a giant ingot of metal or something like that, and the wrong shape to hold the crucible. Remember the little cherubs? He had one of these tongs and he was fishing something out of the forge. Something the size of a coin blank. So the bronze coins needed to be heated up to get the full impression. So that's presumably what that's depicting and what the tongs are for. The hammers. The hammer has a small head. It's not this giant Thor's hammer sort of thing. It's a small head, but it's a long handle. So you've got the power to make the impact, not necessarily from the weight of the hammer, but from the speed that the guy was bringing it down on. And obviously it had a lot more control about how to steer it so it's coming down on the target. How many coins could a three-man team crank out in an hour? This is largely my speculation. The speed and rhythm of coin striking would ultimately be up to the Maleator. Even though he's the lowest ranking guy in the team, he's the slave, he's still the one who's calling the shots, because he's the one setting the rhythm, and you don't want to be out of sync with him. Otherwise your hand will be in the wrong place. So my guesstimate is a coin every 3 to 4 seconds. Once these guys are getting into a good rhythm, you could probably get a coin every 3 to 4 seconds. So one team, or working in shifts, if a team was working continuously, it's about 1,000 coins an hour, or 10,000 coins in a working day. The mintage rate and the staffing levels reported on the plinth and the number of mint workshops throughout the empire needs to easily account for the estimated total mintage of Roman coins at the height of the empire of about 30 million coins a year. That's just imperial coins, not counting provincial coins. Which then led to a discussion on how long would a die last. If my maths is correct, precise numbers are difficult to verify. Exact mintage figures for the Roman mint have not survived. We don't have those, Kevin, we don't have those rolls that we're
pipe rolls.
Yeah. That sort of stuff, I mean, the Romans must have kept them, but they haven't survived. Maybe they put them down in the Library of Alexandria, I don't know. Our best estimates, and the numbers I've seen all over the internet in terms of how long people thought a die would last, about 20,000 to 30,000 coins. That's basically calculated on how many have survived, different varieties for, you know, a certain emperor reigned for 6 months and there's so many varieties, so there must have been lasted about that long. Obviously dies for harder metals like bronze will not last as long as a softer metal like gold, because you don't have to smash it down as hard. Obverse or anvil dies lasted longer than the handheld ones, because the handheld one is the thing that's directly getting hit by the hammer, whereas the one on the bottom, it's getting cushioned by the little soft squishy piece of metal. so it doesn't take quite as much abuse. So if a die is in use at a rate of 10,000 coins per day, that gives a working die a life of only a couple of days, which also fits with, we've got emperors who only reign for a week or something like that, and they've still got 2 different die types. So that kind of fits to me, that sort of maths. That's all I have. Thank you.
Stephen?
In the Anglo-Saxon
Questions
period,
for,
obviously there's a lot of punches used to make up the figures and the letters and things like that. But most of the Roman stuff seems to be like an intaglio.
Yeah, it's carved.
It's carved like a stone. It would
Yes.
take a much higher level of skill to produce a die that was uniform over a period of time.
Yes.
So I'm wondering, how would they be able to keep up the supply of dies? There must have been a lot of people making dies.
Well, as I said, the plinth doesn't say how many sculptors were sitting there supporting, those 39 Meliators and everybody else.
Yeah.
But there's certainly, I think, plenty of work for a Roman die cutter to do if he's going to have to churn out one or 2 dies a week.
Yeah. The other question I've got is, how did that all work with these mints travelling with the legions? You see these pieces with, Mark Antony. Legion 23
this very time that plinth was up was the time of Hadrian, and Hadrian was travelling around the empire with a mint. How big that mint was, we don't know.
They're producing a silver denarii, presumably. That's true.
And there probably would have been 2 or 3 teams, with this mint, along with all the officials and that sort of thing. So it would have been more than just one guy with his hammer and his toolkit.
Yeah.
Yeah, John.
Thanks.
At least the anvil die must have been much bigger than the actual engraved coin. To the question that you started off with, why so many off-struck, and we see these all the time, so that the planchet that was on must have been off-centre, and to be off-centre there must have been an area for it to be off-centre. So the area of at least the anvil die must have been much bigger than the inscribed intaglio thing for it to move. And at that rate, and dealing with hot metal, one can understand at that rate they're not going to worry about if the Meliator gets tired, the rest of the people are putting out that number. They're not going to fuss about quality control.
In terms of quality control, if it's a little bit off centre, they're not going to worry. So as long as the emperor's head is there, okay, that's the ultimate boss, the guy who's got to be kept happy. He's not going to like it if all the coins aren't showing his head.
But wouldn't the angle of the strike skew it to one side on the blank?
How do you mean?
Well, the blanks would be weighed to make sure they're not giving away silver.
Yeah.
So to me, the blank would be a fixed size.
It is, yes.
So to get the angle on there, all you would do is put hit the top die and have it skid off, strike at an angle rather than up and down like a fall of a guillotine or something. So wouldn't that be the way that the partial striking would take place?
Well, the partial, as I said, you got this guy in my theory. He's got like a couple of seconds to get the previous coin off and put the next coin down, then get his hand out of the way before the hammer comes down. Near enough is going to be good enough.
I'm always intrigued by the sculptor making the actual dies themselves. I know in Brisbane, as I've said at a local meeting, there's one person now in Brisbane that can cut an intaglio die for a signet ring, for example, a tiny ring, but he uses a loop. But they must have used a lens.
There's no evidence that the ancient Romans had optics, had lenses or anything like that. They might have, and just none of them have survived. Again, as I said, this is what we know and what we don't know. How a sculptor made a die, we don't know. We don't have a sculptor's toolkit to know whether how they use it. We got that little image of the fresco with the guy. He's banging away with a little tiny hammer. That's all we know.
Maybe, yeah, sorry, yes, no one.
How long would it have taken to carve that plinth with all those names on? It must have been something significant about the people working on that day, for that day's staff list to be recorded in stone.
The
It doesn't
stonemasons
say.
were pretty good.
It's just a list of names and saying that the exactor is glorifying himself by publishing this, but he's got all these other people to thank. So yeah, again, we don't know why it's like that, but we're grateful that it's there.
Yeah.
No. I'd just like to comment, I think the whole concept of the travelling event, remember those elephant and serpent coins, that was made of Julius Caesar's travelling in through Gaul. But I mean, it's not just the die cutters and the striking, they've got to carry the chests of silver and they've got to make a furnace to melt it down. And all this travelling with the army, so mind boggles.
In the medieval time, guys had it easier because they could be a one-man band in terms of the money, and they could travel around, sort of thing.
And of course, this was they inherited most of this from the Greeks, I'm sure, and the Greeks took great pains over. I mean, some of the artistry of Greek coins, if you think about what comes out of Syracuse or some of the Greek city-states, they were works of art, and yet they had to churn them out before the next one. As soon as the next one broke, the replacement was required. Yes, John.
The metal was hot, so that they couldn't have taken it out with their hand.
With the
they
tongs.
must have had to do it with the tongs all
Tongs,
the
yeah.
all the time. It's and they would have had to be very deft to pick up that tiny piece of with the tongs and get it out at the rate.
Again, that fresco with the coin minting. Okay, there was the guy with the hammer, and there was a guy holding there something with tongs.
When Bruce makes our medals, he was always saying that he always heated the blank, and he would get the tongs and put it on because then it was soft, and you could use less pressure to make it expand.
The malleability that I was rabbiting about as a desirable quality, of course, is temperature dependent. Glass has zero malleability at room temperature. It fractures as soon as it's struck. But if you heat it up until it's almost molten, of course you can strike, as we see from bottles, with the imprint in them. So the malleability is temperature dependent.
I've got on that. I think the Greeks must have heated their blanks up before they struck them. I've got a beautiful Athenian tetragram where you can see the flow marks of the silver as though it was hot when it was struck. I suspect that's true. That's another process. You need to put in the furnace and bring it out and belt it.
Slows everything down. If speed is of the essence, if you've got an empire to power,
Exactly.
you can't afford to take those luxuries.
Anyway, look, I think we've come to the end of our time, and just in time too, because you might have noticed lunch has crept in behind you. It's up for me to say thank you all very much for your attendance, and we're glad you all came. And lunch is ready, and then this is basically formally the end of the conference. Rod or John, would you want to say anything about it at all?
Well, just from the chair of the patron, could I just say a very special thank you to everybody, and particularly to Ron for all the wonderful work that he does all the time. He not only does the huge corpus of work, but he does it so cheerfully. And through you, David, thank you for this wonderful hosting from our New South Wales colleagues this year. We look forward to 2 years' time, those of us who may survive, to that time, and Queensland will host the next one here.
I would also like to very much thank Stephen and Jerry, because I specifically asked them to come and bring their data projector and video, the
Laptop.
laptop to do that side of it, because I wanted to record and take pictures.
Yeah.
And we've made a video of the entire conference. With a bit of luck, this time tomorrow, it'll be on the website for everyone to review. Depends on how quick my son-in-law can download it and put it onto YouTube. But he's pretty quick. I've got 1 million photos that I've taken, so I will manipulate them and put them on the conference page so that we can see pictures of everyone, and more or less a chronological time as the conference went on, with what we did, who was speaking. You want to see the video of this morning session, go there. Pictures of who showed everything. It's a recorded history of these 2 days.
That's great.
Right.
Great.
So, just leave
Very
me to
good.
say, drive safely home, please.
Same to you, Dave.